Good morning. I had to get to that last part. That's my favorite part. If I would have cut it off early, it would have just left us all feeling like we needed to hear that last part of the session. Or Nina Simone. That's my favorite song on Thursdays. Because you always want to feel good near the end of the week. I want to welcome everybody to this session. A couple of quick logistical things before we get started. If you can, enable your video if you haven't already. Also, because we are all at home, I would encourage everybody to put themselves on mute unless you're going to be talking. Because again, there's babies in the background, dogs in the background. There's all types of noise that always happen in the background. And just for us to be able to have a really great session, I would encourage everybody to just put themselves on mute. Also, I just want to again welcome everybody to the session. My name is Philip Cunningham, and we're going to be talking about moving from a space of cultural fit to cultural add. I am the senior manager of strength-based initiatives at Mayerson Academy. I am joined today by the best team that I've ever worked with in my entire life. Starting with Janice Weiss. She can just wave. She's my hiring twin, who is also the senior manager of strength-based initiatives. I call her my hiring twin because we were hired on the exact same day at the exact same time. Also, I'm joined by our communications manager and logistical extraordinaire. She keeps us all in line, Maya Bird. Maya, if you could just give everybody a wave. She keeps everybody in line on our team. I really appreciate everything that she does. And then finally, we're joined by the Senior Director of Organizational and Community Development for Mayerson Academy and the leader of the Strong Cincinnati team, Joe Mormon. Joe, if you could give everybody a wave and just let everybody know that you are in the room, that would be awesome. But let's get to it. Today we're going to talk about cultural fit versus cultural add. This is clearly the Securing the Future conference, and I am super excited to have you all here. Um, a couple of things before I actually jump into everything is I want to give a little bit of background about Mayerson. We have been creating great places to learn and work for 29 years and have worked with hundreds of agencies around the world in activating character strengths and transforming cultures. I wish we had more time to talk about it, but ultimately, what we do is unleash the full potential of schools and organizations by leveraging character strengths. The research shows that creating environments where teams can show up as the best version of themselves not only creates higher levels of engagement and retention, but it also increases productivity to be in this space of not fitting the cultural norms. But several years ago, more and more companies started to prioritize mission driven workplaces. And by extension, they began to hire for what I like to call cultural fit, right? It wants to ensure that every candidate that they hire buys into their vision. But like all things, when it's overused, it can create and reinforce corporate monocultures and then feeds groupthink. People by nature are tribal. And what we end up doing is we end up hiring people who are just like us. Hiring for cultural fit alone can be problematic. Instead, what we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to break out of this habit and start thinking about not who fits in, but instead who can add to the culture in order to create a dynamic, innovative, and future focused organization. Our goal is to be able to show you a couple of the strength based tools that we have to help you push your culture forward. All right. So the question really is, but why does this matter? So let's just start with the bottom line, and that just comes down to money and performance. According to a 2015 study from McKinsey and Company, companies with ethnic and gender diversity have a significantly higher financial return. Ethnically diverse teams consistently have provided 35% more profitability than those who are at the bottom quartile. Also, the same companies in the same study, those that had gender diversity had a 15% higher percent of profitability than those who were in the bottom quartile. And those that had gender and ethnic diversity combined were 25% more profitable than those who were not. So while correlation doesn't always equal causation, the correlation does indicate that when companies commit themselves to diverse leadership, they are more successful. More diverse companies, we believe, are better able to win top talent and improve their customer orientation, employee satisfaction, and decision making. And all that leads to this virtuous cycle of increasing returns. This in turn suggests that other kinds of diversity in age, sexual orientation, experience are also likely to bring some levels of competitive advantage for companies that can attract and retain such diverse talented, just such diverse talent. Think about it like this: having diverse teams lets you think outside of the box because of the multiple perspectives that we can come to the table with. Instead of us all thinking in the very same way, these diverse perspectives allows us to be able to approach the problems in a way that we probably wouldn't think if we were in just this very monoculture group think. And so what I want to do is that we're going to break us all up into groups. And I really want to start to think about this idea of fitting in. And we're going to break everybody into groups of three. I'm going to give you about 6 minutes. And we're going to ask the question, what are some of the key factors that make an individual feel like they either fit in or don't fit in at work? And again, these factors can be everything from age, it could be religion, it could be looks, it could be height. It could be just the way that you think about yourself. So start to think about what those key factors are that make an individual feel like they either fit in or don't fit in at work. All right, so Maya's sending us to groups now. And again, you'll have 6 minutes to have a conversation about the key factors that makes an individual feel like they either fit in or don't fit in. Just to make sure everybody that's still in the room, if you could go to your breakout room session, and we're going to talk about what are some of the key factors that make an individual feel like they either fit in or don't fit in at the office.
And if you missed the breakout room invite, you can actually click at the bottom of the screen, either on breakout rooms or on the little dot, and go to the link there.
Hello, I know I've had 2 people join. Right now, we're currently in a breakout room discussion about what makes people feel like they fit in or don't fit in at the office. If you're still here, you can take yourself off mute and talk.
Yeah, we can have the conversation here for those people that are still in the room. What are some of the key factors that make an individual feel like they either fit in or don't fit in at work? I know, me being transparent, there's been situations where I've been the only guy in the room, and sometimes it made me feel like I didn't fit in. Um, so yeah, it's always very interesting. I remember not just being a guy, but being a little bit even more transparent is that in a role I had before I came to Mayerson, I was the only African American executive in the building, and it was definitely me bringing a different perspective to the work, and it was just a very interesting experience for me.
Yeah,
Elizabeth,
go ahead, Janice.
No, I was just going to invite Elizabeth, if you want to join a breakout room, then look down below at your breakout room. There should be a little link on the bottom. If you hover on the bottom, and you can join your breakout room. New folks. So Scotty and Patty, I don't know if you just joined us, but we are now in a breakout room, which you can join if you'd like, where you will be asked to talk about what are the key factors that make an individual feel like they either fit in or don't fit in at the office? What makes you feel like you fit in or don't fit in? What are some of the signals that you get? What makes you feel comfortable or not comfortable at the office?
How much time do we have left? You're on mute, Maya.
Maya, you're on mute.
Oh, we have 2 minutes.
Okay.
And did you see that
in the waiting room? And people continually join.
Okay.
10:18 is where we're supposed to be at the end of this.
Okay.
I just sent you guys a note that I had put the blue line on the wrong line. It's all good. The timing is right, but
Yeah.
10:18. I just moved it. I changed it and fixed it.
Okay.
We're at 10:14. Do you want me to extend the time in the breakout rooms or same schedule?
No, because we want to share out, right?
You want
a
to
little?
share out? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, I'm going to let people in the waiting room in. And I'll send 1 minute remaining warning to the breakout rooms.
Hi, folks. Hi, Kate, who just entered. We are in breakout rooms now, but we will be back in 1 minute. So we are talking about in the breakout rooms, what makes you feel like you either fit or don't fit in at the office, at work, in your workplace. And then we'll be sharing out, but they'll be back.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
Sure, no problem.
All right, 20 seconds before people be coming back.
All right.
Welcome those who are coming back early. Doorbell keeps ringing.
Right.
I feel like I have to run and go get the door. Who's coming? Who's visiting?
I didn't know y'all were hearing the doorbell too. That's what I'm hearing, people coming to the waiting room.
Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
may just be the host. I don't know.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. So hopefully that was a great conversation to really get to a space where we start to talk about what are some of the key factors that make an individual feel like they fit in or don't fit in at work. And so what I want to do is I want 2 volunteers to actually tell me about some of the key factors that they discussed in their breakout room. Not everybody all at once.
Well, I know that we're on a time crunch, so I'll speak up.
Okay.
So a couple of things that we talked about was the diverse ages of individuals that are coming into the workplace and how to make everyone fit in. And then we also talked about sometimes, it being majority women and how men feel when they're at a meeting and women are having their conversations that the men may not want to hear. We talked about that. And then we also talked about being the only African-American at the table and not necessarily feeling as if you fit in, but then having to make yourself fit in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, first of all, because it's Joanna, right? Joanna,
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. So an interesting fact that you just brought up was the different ages. I was actually reading some research recently, and for the first time in history, there are 5 different generations that are working inside of companies for the first time ever, which is, there's so many different ideas and ways in which we think about work and the way that we are supposed to show up for work. And that sometimes can cause some conflict for people and so potentially can create all these different silos of tribes within an organization. And so what we want to be able to talk a little bit more about is how do we get beyond the idea of saying this is the group that is the right group to follow from an age perspective, and how do we begin to create this environment where all people's perspectives are brought to the table in order for us to be able to go after whatever problem is in front of us as an organization. There's nothing to say that the new way is always the right way. There's also something to be said about wisdom. But there's also this idea of fresh ideas from young people. And so, we want to be able to create a space. And that's part of what we were thinking about when we talk about cultural ad, is like, we want to bring all these perspectives to the table to come up with the very best solution. So yeah, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Does anybody else want to share? I need one more person.
I can. This is Kurt.
Okay.
Uh,
Kara, you can go next. Kurt, you jump in.
Okay, I was just saying that very quickly, during our orientation, what we do is I ask all of our incoming team members sort of the reason why they chose Freestore. But then I pick out each one of them and share why we chose them, because I think that's something that allows them to understand that they're bringing something very valuable to our team that makes our team better because of their involvement.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Kurt, for sharing that. That's actually really, really important, especially for it to come from leadership, for people to be able to know what their perspective brings to the table and how that has an impact on the organization. I'm sure that increases buy-in. Kara, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things we talked about is, having a lot of different backgrounds, whether it's education or race, gender, age, and are people using that in the company or organization to exclude people or to include people? And so you can be in a space where there's not somebody that looks like you or has the same background, and they can be intentional, the group can be intentional about engaging you, or they can use it as a way to separate you from the rest of them. And so I think that's a part of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you shared that, because that's actually a really great segue into this next slide. What ultimately ends up happening in corporate culture and corporate fit is that many of us, we often find ourselves joining organizations and we want to fit into that corporate culture, and we end up knitting ourselves into knots to fit in, right? Some of us have ended up like Pearl, where we find ourselves wanting to join part of the group, and instead of us being who it is that we are and bringing our natural perspective, we actually lose that perspective. We lose that uniqueness that the organization may have hired us for in the first place in order for us to be able to fit in to the culture of that organization. But how does that start? The question becomes, it's pretty clear that whether or not you fit in is subjective and really, really personal. It's a perception, though, that everybody feels, and it's a fear of things not being familiar. What I want to talk about a little bit more, though, is this idea of bias and implicit bias specifically, which is referred to by the Kirwan Institute at Ohio State as the attitude or stereotypes that affect our understandings, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. And so to go deeper on this, the human brain is the first computer, right? And it can take in 11 million pieces of information. And in any given moment, like a computer, the brain can't consciously process all 11 million pieces of data at once, because it would just run much lower. So much like when we have too many tabs open on our computer, our brain puts almost everything that we do on autopilot. So things like breathing, digestion, walking, those things end up being on autopilot. In addition to that, only about 2% of our emotions are actually available to us consciously, which leaves about 98% of our emotions to be subconscious thoughts. And that's really where bias resides. It's in the unconscious network of our brains. From birth, we begin to categorize information. We start to say that these animals are dogs and these animals are cats. It helps us make sense and to manage the world around us. Some of this is essential and literally have kept our ancestors alive. It's the fight or flight response. And that information is passed down from generation to generation so that, again, we can put things on autopilot. What we also do, though, is that we begin to assign characteristics to categories based on one's lived experience or the message that we have been given about a lived experience. And then we start to generalize. So a great example of this is when people say that all dogs are dangerous based on one person's experience with one dog biting that person. Generalizations, at best, are imperfect. They're highly flawed and detrimental at worst. It's this latter category, though, that we're concerned about most, as it is the source of racism, sexism, ageism, and much as like we like to deny its existence, it has an impact on everything that we do. But how does this show up in the real world? And what does this look like? And what is the impact that this will have on us in real time? And so what I want to do is I'm going to have Janice actually jump in and start to talk about how this shows up in the real world.
Great, thanks, Phil, for setting that up. So how do they affect us, for instance, when we're hiring someone new at work? The invisible power of culture fit can be career breaking or making. So I'm going to give you an example called John versus Malika. So think of this, you're hiring somebody for a specific role. John comes in, let's say you're Jack, right? And you're the interviewer, and John comes in and he's a Caucasian football player, kind of reminds you of yourself when you were young. You have that sense of chemistry. John's nervous when asked the first question, and because of this familiarity you have with him, you pick up on it. So you want him to feel at ease. So you say, John, it's an interview. Don't worry. I get what you're saying. There's nothing to be nervous about. Take a deep breath and I'll ask the question again. So John relaxes. The question's asked a second time and he aces it, right? Great interview. Malika, on the other hand, second interview of the day, she's a woman of color and she's really eager to impress, and she's super conscious about being very professional and very formal. So when she hesitates after that first question, she gives a very short answer, kind of, terse and to the point. And the interviewer, you, Jack, perceives that as coldness or maybe a little bit like a lack of confidence. She's not really her full self. And you don't see it as nerves. You don't really know her. So overall, she's a strong candidate, a very strong candidate. But the next day, when you're asked to talk about the people that you interviewed, you say, John was great. He was really easy to talk to. He'll fit right in with the staff and clients, right? He fits right in. Malika, she was good, I guess, but she just seemed a little cold and a little distant. So think about that. That whole interaction that literally changed John's interview, got him the job that set off his entire career trajectory for the next 30 years. That change was that 4 seconds of pause, that 4 seconds of empathy that the interviewer showed him. So now John and Malika are on two totally different paths. Now the interviewer, you would say, oh no, oops, sorry. Would say that I did this exact same interview. It was the same for both people. I don't know what you're talking about. You were unconscious about the preference or the bias that you showed toward John. It changes everything for everyone, and it's all about bias. So what we want to talk to you about is to show you how you can get these decisions are made every day in the workplace in all different ways, whether it's hiring, promoting, building teams, or even just planning celebrations, how you recognize each other. We want to give you a new lens to look through to move from culture fit to culture add, literally changing your perspective to overcome biases. And so we can help you begin to rethink culture fit and reframe it as culture add by focusing on 24 character strengths, what we think is a real way to transform cultures. So let me explain to you what that is. If you're not familiar with what the 24 character strengths are, they're listed up here. They're going to appear up here, and they are something that we all hold as humans. They're universal, although each of us has a unique constellation of the 24 strengths. They're the core to what humanity is, and they were identified by a group of scholars and scientists about 20 years ago, working around the world, researching what makes us human. They, in fact, founded the VIA Institute on Character, which is actually headquartered, I'm so proud of, here in Cincinnati in the Scripps building. And they created the VIA survey, which has now been taken by over 15 million people in 47 different languages, so many languages, so all over the world. It's offered for free online, so any of you can actually go and take the survey after. But what it does is it generates a report
that helps you understand, sort of a map of your soul. It shows you what strengths show up for you at the highest and a little lesser. So you have 24 strengths that are numbered from 1 to 24. The top 5 are considered your signature strengths. Those are the ones that really energize you. They are effortless. They are who you are at your core. They're really what you're using to function to be in the zone. So even though I just said they're universal, we all have them across cultures. We all come to understand character strengths with our own bias. Again, bias. We value some higher more than others. And this is important when we think about the workplace. So think about it this way. I like to look back at the dinner table that we all grew up around. So you may have had a boisterous, loud, full of laughter kind of family dinner every night. That family, your family, would have valued zest. Zest is one of our character strengths that was identified, and humor. Really thought that those two, that's what we want to celebrate, and that's what we bring literally to the table. Or did you grow up like me in a more formal environment? Kind of father knows best, right? Much more quiet, where my father valued prudence and self-regulation. So whatever table you grew up with, that's going to influence how you think about what strengths you value today. So you might think for me that because I grew up around a table that really valued prudence and judgment and self-regulation, that's what I value highly now. But no, as a good daughter, I rebelled. I rebelled against my father. And I actually have sort of a visceral or hot button reaction when I see somebody with too much prudence or too much judgment or too much self-regulation. I react, and I then can overcompensate and not give them the due time or attention that they deserve. So we all have to be conscious of that because our biases are, whether at home or at work, our strengths biases are built on years of personal interactions and actually societal norms as well. So as you saw, Pearl, the story of Pearl, our hero in our story, she did weave herself into knots to literally fit in. And she forced her way in. She compromised on her values, on her authenticity, on her soul to fit in and to become one of the guys. She was never comfortable what she did, but she did learn to conform. But it's not good for her, and it's not good for the workplace. And especially it's not good because behind her, the door slammed closed. And then all of a sudden, when in this is actually a Pixar video that you all can find online, Lacey was also joining the team. And that's at that point, Pearl realized the sacrifice she was making by not valuing diversity at a higher level. And so she had to then together think about how to change the perspective and move toward helping everyone understand how different perspectives, talents, backgrounds, identities were all essential to success. So what we want to do now, we're going to go back and break into groups, and we'd like you to think about your own organizations. In each of your organizations, if you really sit back and think about it, there are probably, and you're going to see in the chat, Maya's going to chat in this poster that we have that shows all the character strengths. We'd like you to think about what are the 3 character strengths right now that your organization most highly values. So what do you kind of navigate to? What do you think of when you're hiring or when you're celebrating? And what are the 3 strengths that you wished that were valued more in your organization? So I have a little asterisk there because we want to exclude kind of leadership. Leadership is one of the strengths, and I'm going to actually hand it over to Phil. Phil, fill us in a little bit why leadership maybe it makes sense, but we want you to think beyond it for this.
Yeah, well, beyond leadership being like the low-hanging fruit strength that you want every person to come into your building with, we want you guys to think a little bit deeper, because leadership by definition on the VIA character strengths is about the ability to be able to organize people and get them to go in one specific direction. And so what we want you to do is think a little bit beyond the idea of leadership and start to think about what other strengths you would value as an organization as you're thinking about hiring a senior leader on your team.
Right. Thank you, Phil. So the idea is you're hiring a senior leader. What 3 strengths do you think your company would most value when hiring that person? And what 3 strengths would you like them to value more when hiring that senior leadership role for that role? Okay, we're going to have 8 minutes. You'll be in groups of 3. It should be different groups. And then we'll come back and we'll share. Okay, thanks, guys. I can't see the people anymore.
There's about 4 people who are still in the room.
Yes. And I've lost my view of people. And I don't know how to get it back. It's weird.
It may be behind your PowerPoint.
Move the rooms, so at least the people in the rooms at least have 2 people to talk to.
Okay.
In case
Janice, you might
get
go to
the breakout
view.
invitation, there is.
Go to, I'm sorry, go to where, Phil? I mean, Joe?
View in the top right-hand corner. I always click on side by side so you can see the
No, and
PowerPoint.
I'm not seeing a view thing, isn't, I know that sounds crazy. Hide video panel, hide floating media controls. It's not, my view thing has just disappeared. It's weird. I feel like I'm hearing let's see, let me try to get out of this for a second and then go back in. No, oh, here it is. There it is. Go there. Okay.
What's the target wrap-up time?
I
see it's scheduled till 11, but I know we planned for
10:58 at latest, 10:55 to 10:58.
Gotcha. So there'll be a deep, like a share out from this one, and then we're leaving time for Q&A at the end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Joe, I see you got the blue shirt memo.
I did. Yes. Not my sailing shirt.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've got 5 minutes.
Okay, great.
Janice, you're owning this. We'll go questions before
Before the evaluation.
Okay.
I have a slide. We'll see if, yeah.
I see you just joined from Feast with Food. 2 minutes remaining. Send a reminder.
Hi, Ian. We're in breakout rooms right now. I'm not sure if you lost Wi-Fi and came back on, or you were in before. They'll be coming back in about a minute.
Okay.
But we're
Yeah.
answering the question, if you were to hire someone for a senior leadership role in your organization, what 3 strengths do you think would be most highly valued? And what 3 strengths do you wish you could be valued more? We have the strengths chart in the chat if you want to look at it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
We should all be back now.
Hi, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. So good to see you all. So I'd love, again, to have some volunteers, 1 or 2 people at least, who can just share what values do you think your organization would look for when hiring a senior leader, and what values would you hope that they would look for more? Who wants to share out? And what was that conversation like?
No, I'm happy to share. This is Kelly Holter, and I'm from Tender Mercies.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you.
Hi there. So I believe that we typically hire for honesty and for humor and for kindness/compassion. But when I looked at this list, and I haven't had much time to study it, I think that what we really need to hire for, we have to be more cognizant of, is hiring for self-regulation, for forgiveness, and perhaps for creativity.
Mm. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And it's not like, we don't suggest that you have people take the survey and then specifically have hire them just because they have it high on their survey. But we do suggest that when you're interviewing, or when you discuss who you're looking for, or when you make that job description, you're very aware of it, right? Because all of the same, is going to be, it's that definition of insanity, right? You keep repeating. And when you want to grow and innovate, especially for the future, as Vanessa talked about, when you want to break down some of those barriers and be able to see the new and different, you do want to be expansive in that way. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing that. Eye-opening. And somebody else, please.
Hello? Hi. So we talked about perspective, hope, and curiosity, because in this changing world, you have to be able to adapt to all the changes that might be outside your comfort zone individually, and people that are resilient and can do that are going to be the best leaders.
And it isn't something you might have been thinking about a year ago, right? And so if you use an old job description that you had set up a year ago, or an old mindset, you wouldn't be able to articulate that even. And it is all about the questions you ask and the people that you recruit. Make sure that you're looking, in a really different spaces and places for people that you may not have ordinarily attracted, been able to attract before, and look for that hope. And that, the conversations have really changed, and how we perceive them. I think I have time for one more if somebody else would like to chime in. Thank you so much. I don't know your name whole home, but thank you for doing it.
You're on mute.
It's Nina Creech, people working cooperatively, and I'm in the home.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. One more. Any interesting insights that you had about how you might value something differently going forward?
I had one to share. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Hi, yeah, this is Kate. I was just curious, maybe it's more of a question, is just in terms of thinking about organizational value, like values and like setting, you know, as organizations having values, these are the things we value as core to us. And organizations I've worked with, including my own in the past, has sort of said, okay, if these are our values, let's hire for these values, which then can become very limiting in terms of, I'm seeing a lot of the same words in terms of when I see lists of value statements, you know, values in the strengths. Can you talk to me a little bit about the difference there or the danger there? Or do you know what I'm asking?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we set out values that are important to us, and so then we kind of replicate, and we think that, you know, we set these values maybe a couple of years ago, and it's not that we need to veer from them because they probably are core to us, but we need to explore them deeper with a new lens on to understand what they really mean and how they come to life in our workplaces. So I think, you know, because we've all been through those, you know, creating our mission statements and our value statements in many, many meetings, and you boil it down. How can we be so clear? So it's 5 words you've captured. But we really need to go back to those dialogues we had, right? Those rich, deep conversations where we negotiated ourselves down to those 5 words. And now we say, see it through a lens of strengths and understand maybe a nuance to what your values are and how that would be interpreted in today's changing, evolving society and culture norms and everything that we're going through. So it's not to throw out those values, but it is to expand, you know, go back to maybe thinking how they can be a little bit broader and what their true meaning is and how they come to life today. Is that helpful a little bit, Kate? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much. So that's just a little bit as a sort of snapshot into the kind of work that we do, and we do it on many, many levels and in many, many different ways. Because we really say culture ed is about being conscious about these biases so you can intentionally build toward a more diverse team. I love what Vanessa said, that you know, belonging happens by design. You have to think about it. You have to make sure that you can't just take things for granted. And it's important to have this diversity for the reasons that Phil talked about earlier. It's that bottom line performance. Okay, we all care about making sure that we can stick to our budgets, or if we're in a profit center, make money, or whatever it is, deliver our goals. And the way we're going to do that, though, is by creating a culture that will attract and retain top talent. It's always that case, right? We want people who care and are passionate and are coming to work fully engaged. So the other idea about bringing different points of view to the table, obviously, is also new ways of problem solving, right? So if you always attack a problem the same way with the same mindset, you're never going to really get to that innovative, out-of-the-box way of thinking. So opening up different thoughts really does create a more engaged and highly productive workplace. So we have three things we want to leave you with, and we're going to get into Q&A in a second also. But 3 things that I want you to really walk away with is, the first one is, sneak peek, know your own personal biases. So it is about unlearning our habits and understanding where we come from and what our preferences are. So become aware of what you carry with you, right? And it's really that moment of pause. You have to take the time to become aware. And then, like the interviewer who was interviewing John and Malika, step back and say, oh my gosh, I really made a difference. You know, it was a bias, it was a preference, and I didn't give Malika the same chance that I gave to John. So step away from those preferences that are based on old stereotypes or misinformation. Then secondly is also know your team strengths, and that's a little bit of the exercise we just went through. What we do, another tool that we provide in our institute, is we actually chart out the whole team's strengths. We look at everybody's top strengths and their bottom strengths and how that works together. And we look for trends and clusters and gaps. And so, for instance, on our little team, our little Strong Institute team, we identified that we have a whole lot of creativity, which is great. And our instinct is that when we want to bring somebody new onto the team, how fun is it, right? To bring out somebody else who's full of creativity. But what we really need is probably somebody, yeah, who's open to creativity, but also has prudence or self-regulation higher, also because we know that otherwise we're going to go wild and we'll never be able to execute and be productive. So it's being aware of how it all falls on the team. And then lastly, it really is this idea of intentionality, of deciding to prioritize. You can't just give lip service to it. You really have to think deeply, like you said, about your values, about your mission statement, about how you really care to move from culture fit to culture add, because culture fit is that thing that we used to always say, oh, you fit right in, right? Well, what are we saying really when we say that? So how do you prioritize culture add? And some of what we do when we teach is, spot and celebrate each other's strengths. And by doing that, you just give, by articulating how much somebody is adding to the team by being a little bit different, really gives you that way to break down old barriers and old ways of doing things, and really is your invitation into future thinking, which is so important. So for Pearl, what she did, she was able to, once Lacey came on board, she was able to open up the think differently and have everybody invite everybody into a much more diverse, or patchwork. I like to think she wove a patchwork into her little work culture so that everybody was invited to the table. In our work at the Strong Cincinnati Institute, we help organizations and businesses transform workplaces really to maximize this culture add. And we do it through a lot of touch points, bringing in a strengths-based perspective, whether it's we teach people how to do it when they're giving feedback, or when they're looking at performance management, or onboarding, or job crafting, or recognition. All those little touch points in your organization are opportunities to be more expansive and move from really this negative old way of doing things to a much more positive and reinforcing way. And then, it really is, the result is that you get to really help with performance, engagement, and well-being on the individual, the team, and even the organizational level. And we like to say we even are working to transform Cincinnati and even the world. So one last thing before we go to Q&A, and there's so much we could cover, and we feel badly that we just sort of skimmed the surface here in 50 minutes. Our institute lasts for 6 weeks, and we do 20 hours of work with people, and then we have a network beyond that. But this thought, and I want to give kudos to Maya, because Maya really coined this phrase, and I love that it really gives, it sort of sums it all up and what we're trying to do, to remember that bias and culture fit thinking is all based on this idea that the first thought you have is what you're conditioned to think, but the second thought is your choice. So pause long enough to get to your choice. You can choose what you want your organization to look like. You can choose who you bring to the table. You can choose how you move into the future to be more expansive. So what I'd like to do, we have, we're trying to keep close to timing. We're supposed to let you guys go at 10:58. We have a few minutes for Q&A. We also have a survey at the end. We always love to hear your feedback, because we're on a path of continuous improvement. We'd like to hear what you liked, what you didn't like, what we can do better next time. But we'd like to open it up to Q&A. And I would just say, if anybody has a question about strengths, or about how to move forward on any part of this, just jump in. I don't think we're going to do just literally jump in, take yourself off of mute, and you can ask a question if you'd like. And while you're thinking about your questions, I will also say that we have done a lot of work of recent in the last few months in the world of implicit bias on all different levels. We had another session that we did with our network. Anyone who goes through our institute then becomes part of our continuous learning network. And we had a whole session where we provided, yes, a background on implicit bias, but then we had people grapple with real life work situations. We had about 10 different hypothetical work situations. We broke people into teams to say, what really would we do? Because it's very easy to say you want to be equitable and get rid of bias, but in real life situations, there are nuances, there are challenges, and we like people to really think deeply about it. And Phil, you did some work recently as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, Miranda asked a question before I jump into this idea of implicit bias and the things that we do in our implicit bias training. She asked the question, can you share more about the practices, frameworks, modalities to become aware of one's own biases? Did you want me to jump in?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, you can take that.
Well, one of the things that we've been doing recently is we've been doing this activity called the circle of trust. And in the circle of trust, what we do is we encourage people to, we don't encourage, we ask you to make a list of 10 people that you will call in an emergency. That emergency could be a positive thing like the birth of a child and you need somebody to drive you to the hospital, or it could be a negative thing where potentially you're going to jail and you need somebody to bail you out, right? So you make this list of 10 people, and then we start to ask you questions about who and what the identity of these people in your list are, right? And that uncovers bias for people, because we start to ask questions about, like, what is the education level of the people that are in your circle? What is the gender of the people that are in your circle? What is the race of the people that are in your circle? Because these are people, the people that are in your circle of trust are consistently going to be the people that you go to for counsel. And if you find yourself that the people that are in your circle are all like you, you're probably only going to get the same type of advice. You're ultimately going to create an echo chamber for yourself. You find yourself inside of a bubble, and there you don't have that cultural add. You don't have different perspectives. And so what I encourage people to do is that's probably one of the easiest things that we can do as it relates to some of the frameworks and practices that you could start to tease out to be able to discover what your own biases are. If we were to go deep into some of our implicit biases, we start to talk about our teamwork and how we may look at a specific strength with our own perspective attached to that strength, and we attach and we categorize negative and or positive emotions to that strength. And so the idea of potentially leadership being a really great strength for one person may feel grading for another person. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to not only discover how your strengths show up and how those things are interpreted from your perspective, but also open up the way that you think about those strengths and the way that you interpret those strengths from others. And so those are just a few of the things that we could do and would do when we start to like talk about the practices and the frameworks to become aware of our own biases. But we can go deep on this. I love this work.
Yeah, we do. And there's some other exercises we do as well, which even just like if you were to look at yourself in whatever identity category you want to put yourself in, for me, it'd be white Jewish woman, right? And think in the world, like what are the negative stereotypes the world has about me? What are the positive stereotypes the world has about me? And when you realize there's like this set on both sides and where do I hold about myself, it just helps you think deeply, because if you can look at yourself and how the world might regard you, then you can start to put yourself in other people's shoes too, and then figure out how other biases are impacting other people as well. I mean, we're giving short shrift to it all, and we really would dive deeper if we were with you, but there's all different tools to have you pause and think and just look seriously at yourself in the mirror. I hope that's helpful. I think we are closing in on time. So I thank you all so much for attending. And again, we can answer any questions. If you have any, contact us after Mayerson Academy. I'm sure we can provide you with emails. I think that's in our bios as well. And we're glad to engage in any way that you'd be interested, just questions or more, because there's so much to cover. So if we can, we're going to put in a chat. We're going to put in our survey in the chat. If you can do that, if you have 2 minutes and you can fill it out now or in the next half hour or so while you're watching other things, that would be great. And we really appreciate it. And we thank you. Namaste for coming. Enjoy the rest of the show. Lots more to come.